Good morning. This is John Kogan. I'm the CEO of Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar, Building Recruiter Relationships That Work. Are recruiters necessary or a necessary evil? It can certainly seem like the latter when you're searching for a job. However, many people swear by their recruiter relationships and demand that without them, you'll have a much tougher time finding your next job. Well, we will look at some key strategies this morning that you can employ to create and manage recruiter relationships and transform them into effective alliances. And our hope is that this will help you not only through job searches that you're currently going through, but even throughout your career, including at times in between job searches. So we hope that today will be highly useful for everyone involved. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we will hear a presentation from our speaker, and then we will move to a panel discussion where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you. So if you have questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. Hopefully you see the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we'll do our best, and we will follow up afterwards on any questions that we cannot get to. We will send out a link to the soft copy of this presentation to all attendees, and it is probably already actually posted out on Proformative. We usually get these up before the events happen, but certainly today it will be. And if you would rather not wait for the email to get to you, but want to just go out and grab it, just go to our site and search under the name of the presentation, actually of today's event, which is Building Recruiter Relationships That Work. We are offering CPE credits for the CPAs in today's audience. Now, to make that happen, we have to ask some polling questions as we go. So actually, at the end of today's presentation by Cindy Kraft, who I will introduce shortly, we will present you with 2 polling questions. These are not a test to see if you remembered everything that was said today. It's really just to make sure you're here. And actually, there's some interesting statistical information we'd love to collect and even talk about during the Q&A portion of today's event. So even if you're not here for CPE credit, we'd love it if you would pay attention to and just take 10 seconds to answer the poll questions when they come up. Let's give a quick word about Proformative before we hand it over to Cindy Kraft and get going with today's content. For those who are new to Proformative, we are the largest and fastest growing online resource for senior finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. We welcome people at all levels of your profession. What you'll find on Proformative is a completely ad-free and noise-free community of almost 500,000 folks actually at this point. It includes CFOs, controllers, treasurers, and others. I like to call it the most boring place on the web. We're just here to figure out how we gain knowledge and get work done. So there's no socializing, no connecting per se, or limited connection, and we do that on purpose. It's really about asking questions and getting answers on anything you could use in your day-to-day job. And it's all free and available at Proformative.com. So we would love for you to check that out and learn about how you can use Proformative to make your life easier. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. We're very happy to have with us Cindy Kraft, who is a CFO coach, and she is America's leading career and personal brand strategist for CFOs and corporate finance executives. Cindy partners with clients to help them understand their marketability, clearly articulate their value, and position themselves as the clear and compelling choice. Her clients are among the top echelon of finance gurus who understand their unique status requires unique packaging. A typical senior level finance executive spends so many hours working in his or her job that they have, by necessity, shelved managing their careers. Cindy's client list includes CFOs of private and publicly traded corporations, private equity firms, and not-for-profit organizations, as well as other visionary and accomplished senior-level finance executives seeking to position themselves for the most coveted leadership positions. Cindy, with that, I welcome you and ask you to take it away.
Thank you, John. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for jumping on this call this morning. So here's my question. Are recruiters necessary, or are they a necessary evil? I think if you asked many executives, the common answer would be necessary evil. But are they evil? Are they necessary? My answers are no and yes. My colleagues and I did a survey around how executives viewed recruiters. And we actually separated out the responses between C-level executives and senior executives to see what differences, if any, would appear in their responses. So while some results were quite expected, there were a few surprises. In response to what do you most value in a recruiter relationship, getting solid leads and opportunities that are a great fit only narrowly edged out the importance of confidentiality and accessibility. Landing a great position was fifth on the list of 5 for both the C-suite and other senior executives, which tells me that there is some clarification that needs to be done around what recruiters do, how they do it, and how best to work with them. So, are recruiters necessary or a necessary evil? It can certainly seem like the latter when you are searching for a job. And this morning, we will look at some key strategies that you can employ to create and manage recruiter relationships that can transform those relationships into effective alliances. What recruiters do and what they don't do. We're going to talk about how to be smart in building those relationships. And finally, how to leverage the right relationships. I am always surprised at the amount of misinformation that surrounds recruiters and recruiting. So let's start with a primer on recruiters to ensure we are all on the same page going forward. So first, what do? They find people for positions. What do they not do? They do not find jobs for people. This is a subtle distinction that, if not understood, can drive job seekers, and particularly executives, absolutely mad. Finding people for positions and finding jobs for people are not the same things. A recruiter works for and is paid by a company to find the right position, the right person for the position they have open. If you're in their database and you are the right person, it can feel like they found you a job. But that's really not what happened. What they found was the right person to fill a specific opening who happened to be you. You will avoid a lot of frustration, irritation, and downright anger in working with recruiters if you remember this one very nuanced point. Recruiters find people for positions, not jobs for people. So there are 2 kinds of recruiters. There are internal recruiters who typically work for one specific company. They are often a part of the human resources team, and their job is purely to recruit for that specific company. And there are external recruiters, often called third-party recruiters, who are more like free agents. They can target specific companies with whom they want to work, and they might very well be working with multiple companies at any one time. Among the third-party recruiters, there are 2 different kinds of recruiters, contingency and retained, and those are the ones we will be discussing today. And it is very important that you know the difference. Oftentimes, contingency recruiters are called headhunters. While most of these folks prefer to be called recruiters, the name headhunter is appropriately descriptive since, in essence, they hunt heads, oftentimes just for their databases. Contingency recruiters may or may not have actual positions they are filling. Sometimes, in lean times, they will shop a quality candidate around to prospective employers. That sounds good, right? It might be, but it could also be a huge trap that gets you excluded from consideration. How? Well, envision this scenario. A contingency recruiter gives you a call and says she has a great position that does indeed sound like a great fit for you. It might be real, it might not be real, but it sounds like it's a great fit for you. You fire off your resume to her, and instead of a real position that she is trying to fill, she begins shopping you to some prospective companies in the hopes that she will get a hot hit and put herself one step closer to a big commission check. If you have ever received those kinds of calls as a decision maker, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe she stumbles across a company who does indeed have an opening, but has opted not to use a recruiter to fill that position. Perhaps it's posted somewhere, or maybe the company is relying on employee referrals or a strong network for leads to fill that opening. You happen to get wind of that opening through a warm lead and make the initial contact directly, unaware the recruiter who has your resume has previously shopped you to this company. You are definitely qualified, but the company now faces a problem. Your resume was presented by a recruiter they didn't hire. They had no intention of paying. But who could claim she is owed a commission because she presented you first? The result? The company could choose to disqualify you in order to avoid having a commission claim or lawsuit on their hands. A big loss for a potential candidate. So what is critically important to remember about contingency recruiters before you work with them is that you should interview them to make sure they are a good fit for you. And I'll talk more about this in just a minute. Release your resume only for a specific position. Add a caveat that the release of your resume is predicated on the written limitation that they are to get your permission before circulating it. And of course, if it makes sense, pursue a relationship with this recruiter. The caveat is critically important. First, it puts you in control of what happens to your resume. You know who it is being delivered to and for what positions, and based on your goals, whether it even makes sense for that company to receive your resume for that particular position. It puts you in the driver's seat. But there is another reason. That is, among contingency recruiters who work with multiple companies, those multiple companies can all be shopped by multiple recruiters, which means, or can mean, the potential for recruiter wars. If multiple recruiters submit your resume, who gets the commission? If the company receives your resume through a networking contact and then through a recruiter, will the recruiter have positioning to sue for a commission? Again, most companies will opt to avoid any possibility of a recruiter war, which can leave you high and dry as a prospective candidate. Far better from the company's perspective to nix you entirely as a potential candidate than to risk being sued or to have to pay a 30% commission on your first year's salary when they clearly have other viable candidates. One final and very important point to know about contingency recruiters. They are paid for their efforts after the candidate they have placed makes it to the 90-day mark. If the candidate fails prior to the date of payment, they get nothing for their efforts. Well, except a company that isn't very happy with their service and may never use them again. The other recruiter group that we're going to talk about are retained recruiters. And again, I think some of the same stipulations for working with contingency recruiters apply to retained. You will want to interview them for fit, stay in control of the process by instructing them in writing not to release your resume without your permission and consent, although it's far less frequent that a retained recruiter would do that. It does happen. And finally, if they play in your space, build their relationship. The retained business model is quite different than the contingency model. And actually at the senior level, these really are the big boys with whom you want to build bridges. Retained recruiters are paid in advance to find the right candidates, which means they are paid regardless of whether or not they do actually find the right candidate within their contracted time frame. With that kind of payment arrangement, you can bet that they most often do deliver, and they deliver top quality candidates. And retained recruiters are almost always working on confidential searches. This means that more often than not, retained recruiters have a very close working relationship with the client company, and it probably spans many years. The recruiter understands the company's needs and its culture. The hardest thing for which to hire, and why, although you might seem like a great fit, you really are not a great fit. Their reputation and paycheck depend on delivering the right person for the right position. These are the guys you want in your network. A big irritation about recruiters arose as a question on Quora. That is, that the recruiters often do not divulge all the details of their requisition. No, they don't. And they have good reasons for not divulging that information. If the company wanted a public search, they wouldn't need to conduct a confidential search through a recruiter. This point alone is why building a relationship with recruiters prior to needing a job is in your best interest. Where there is trust, there is usually more detail forthcoming and a better understanding of your fit for the kinds of positions they typically place. You might be wondering about my suggestion to interview the recruiters. I firmly believe that it makes sense for you to know who you're working with and that you have chosen someone who understands your goals sufficiently to match you with the right opportunities at the right companies. Now remember, the goal is to build relationships, though. So this interview is really a conversation. It's not an interrogation. It's not defensive. It's really offensive. You might begin by asking them about themselves. How long have they been in the recruiting industry? What does their typical placement look like? What has been one of their greatest success stories? Then flip the tables and ask how they view you as a potential candidate for their typical companies. Do they view you as a strong candidate? Why? Or why not? Do they believe you are marketable? If so, why? If not, why not? It's often very difficult to get recruiter feedback post-interview. So making an attempt to uncover some valuable information from the recruiter perspective and begin a mutually beneficial relationship at this juncture can be effective, particularly if you are a strong, marketable candidate. One question that came up while I was preparing this presentation asked about how, after you've talked to a recruiter about one job, you get in front of them for a different opportunity that they also have available. Really, the short answer is relationship. One built on reciprocity, trust, and constancy, so that you are top of mind when opportunities arise, and which the recruiter will want to help you because it helps him or her, particularly in the pocket. If you don't have a relationship with the recruiter, you are instead just a resume, which means that you have to bug the recruiter if you want to stay top of mind. And that might work, but most likely it will not work. Either way, it is definitely not strong positioning for you as a candidate. desperate is never desirable. And even if you aren't desperate, it can be perceived that way. Ultimately, what you want is recruiters calling you for the right opportunities at the right level with the right companies. So now that we know what they do and how they do it, let's look at how you can be smart about building some effective recruiter relationships. First and foremost, it is always about networking. Networking just doesn't apply to recruiters, but it is definitely true with recruiters. Think about it this way. How do or would you feel if someone you haven't talked to in 10 years calls you up, says some superficial things to move the conversation forward, and then asks you for a big favor? Now, if you have the gift of helping, then you're probably out of your chair and on the request before you've disconnected. But for most of us, we feel a bit used. We haven't talked in ages. I barely know you anymore. You only call when you need something. And then you expect to get without giving. And you expect me to deliver a J-O-B. Can you just imagine how many job seekers are trying to get something, in this case a job, from a recruiter every single hour of every single day? In their defense, I don't defend them often, I can imagine they are feeling a little bit beat up. Add to that the misunderstanding of what they do. Find jobs for people versus find the right person for a specific opportunity. And, well, that relationship can get off to a pretty contentious start if it even leaves the ground. So another question that we asked some executives was how many recruiters they typically worked with at any one time. And you'll notice that the numbers were pretty similar among C-suite executives and senior executives. And I believe they're right. I believe 1 to 2 recruiters makes the most sense for any senior finance executive. Remember, recruiters only hold about 10 to 12% of the market share. They don't hold all the jobs. There's no reason why you have to work with 50 recruiters. You don't even need 20. 1 to 2 really is probably ideal. 1 to 2 that you have a relationship with. So recruiters need to be a strategy and a necessary strategy, but certainly not your only strategy. And not your only strategy because they hold such a small part of the job market. Now, the best opportunities come through networking with recruiters and building visibility to attract those recruiter inquiries that can launch a longer-term relationship. If the recruiter sees you have something from which they can benefit, trust me, they'll be on you like fleas on a dog. We also asked executives who they preferred to work with, a small boutique or a name brand like Heidrich or Korn Ferry, or both. And as you can see, there was a fairly even split among C-level executives saying they didn't care, a larger separation for senior executives who preferred a small boutique over the big boys. Another interesting statistic was that both audiences barely broke the 4% mark on preferring to work only with a multi-office, multinational, name brand search firm. When I talk with clients, they almost always talk about the name brand recruiters. Yet, when this group of executives was asked specifically who they would prefer to work with, name brands got a small, very small response, perhaps born of the reality of the situation, of what it's really like to work with them versus the wishful thinking that they imagined. Sometimes the allure of a name brand can overshadow the effectiveness of a small boutique. What you really want, though, doesn't hinge on the bigness of their name, but rather on their effectiveness, reputation, proven ability to maintain confidentiality, follow through, and placement fit. I raise these points to say, have you really given thought to who the recruiters are that make the most sense for you, your career goals, your discipline, and your target audience? Are you competitive among the big boy name brands? Or is a small boutique a better fit for your targeted position? In choosing how to build those right relationships, it would make sense for who to connect with to be a strong consideration. You can be reactive and respond only to those recruiters who reach out to you, or you can be proactive and seek out, before you need them, those recruiters with whom it makes sense to have a professional relationship. So let's talk about some real frustration CFOs have in working with recruiters, and then we'll circle around to exploiting some right relationships. Lack of follow-up and follow-through might be one of the biggest frustrations among executives and the C-suite. I constantly hear things like, my single biggest issue is the failure of executive recruiters to follow up. I consistently get urgent requests for resumes and then just never seem to hear from them again. Or this, I would say that a recruiter first discovers you, it was for something fairly specific. If for a variety of reasons that position doesn't pan out, then you just never hear from them again. I even had one very frustrated client who said those recruiters who refused to follow through would find the same reception from him once he landed with a new company. You can't control how another person responds, but you can control how you follow up and follow through with others, particularly when recruiters are contacting you for positions outside your area of expertise or below your level of position. If the recruiter is a major player in your space, turn that inquiry, even though it's not a good fit for you at the moment, into an opportunity for a relationship by referring them to someone qualified in your network who meets those spec requirements. Square peg, square hole, or nothing. That is the recruiter mindset. One survey respondent said, recruiters don't really want to speak with you unless you meet 110 to 120% of the client's requirements for any particular job spec. Honestly, that is what they are paid to do. If finding the right candidate was easy, there would be no need for recruiters. And if you sat on the other side of the desk, the hiring side, you know it's true. It just feels quite different when you are hunting that new opportunity. If you attended January's webinar with me about executive branding, you know that I believe branding is how you can position yourself as the exact square peg the recruiter wants. Remember, culture fit is the most difficult part of the hiring process. I guess the only thing more frustrating than not hearing from recruiters is getting calls repeatedly from recruiters who haven't done their homework and call about opportunities that are clearly not a good fit or are below your current level of responsibilities. Hunting heads comes to mind. I actually wrote a blog post about this particular issue. In some cases, where there is a contingency recruiter who is looking for a fast and dirty deal, it is definitely a reflection on their poor, inadequate, incompetent ability to do their job. However, If you are sitting in the driver's seat of your career, it is incumbent upon you to have a clear and compelling value proposition that speaks to your level, skills, and ability. If you don't have clarity around those things, a recruiter isn't going to spend time figuring it out for you. If your message is mute, invisible, mixed, or muddy, it will result in calls for opportunities that are not a good fit for you. Slightly different than wrong opportunities because this is from the client side. The recruiter's client. Since the recruiter doesn't understand the company, the culture, the position, and the needs in that position, a poor fit is always the outcome. And I think this speaks directly to the importance of having a relationship with a few recruiters versus merely accepting cold calls from unknown recruiters. These are the kinds of situations that brand recruiters as headhunters. A name, by the way, that many recruiters feel is disparaging. You are not the recruiter's client. That is so important for you to remember. But apparently numerous senior executives have their ideal of a dream recruiter anyway. Take the respondent who said, I want a recruiter who is responsive to phone calls, listens to what I am looking for in a new position. If I do not want to travel an hour and a half to a job, he doesn't contact me about one that is that far away. The best recruiters are the ones that listen to my own desires and keep me in mind for those right opportunities. Or this one. My dream recruiter honestly understands my unique background, highly complex lower middle market, and personality, I need challenges, and that I am only a fit for very limited, unique situations. Except these recruiters are not, these executives are not the recruiter's clients. Remember, the recruiter is paid by the company who is the client. The recruiter is in the business of finding the right person for the open position, not finding jobs for people. And that isn't to say that if you have a good relationship with a recruiter, the recruiter isn't going to know that about you. But it does lead me to say that almost every single one of these frustrating issues can be traced to one underlying fact. There is no relationship with the people who have the opportunities you want to know about. A recruiter still and always will work for the client company. But a great recruiter relationship means that the recruiter understands your clear and compelling marketable value proposition, which is your responsibility, and where you are a perfect fit within the right space of your industry. And they partly understand that because you have made that crystal clear in your branded message. So what can you do to build those right relationships? Well, you do want to build them before you need them. Long, long before you need recruiter relationships, you should be building them. It changes the paradigm of the relationship and gets things off to a much more productive start. You don't need anything, and you especially don't need a job, but you are in a position to give. That makes your positioning very attractive and very strong. And one of those giving strategies would include being a source of referrals. If there is one key way to build trust and goodwill with recruiters with whom you want a long-term relationship, be a resource for them and to them. If a job opportunity comes your way which isn't a good fit for you, refer a colleague. Now, that requires you having a network, of course. And to network, which is a verb, right? It's a verb. There's action required. You must network. If you've had a great recruiter relationship and that has resulted in the move into another position, reward them. Whenever possible, use their service and recommend their service to others. Thank them. You know, coincidentally, yesterday I was on an industry chat, and this was the comment made by a recruiter. She said, and I'm quoting, "I am amazed at how rarely someone follows up with even a quick email after an interview. And in fact, how often people who I just placed don't even do follow-up to thank me." I'm talking senior executives here, people who I've just placed in a job that will earn them well into six figures, and a large part don't even follow up to say thanks. Now, it's interesting because that is the exact thing that I opened with, saying that's one of the big frustrations of executives working with recruiters. And again, while you can't control what they do, you can control what you do. And this little thing, just like a post-interview letter, a thank you note to a recruiter after you've received help from them, really goes a long way towards solidifying you in their minds as somebody that they're definitely going to keep in mind for a position when there's a good fit that rolls across their desk. So, reward them. Be selective and then get busy. As the stats bore out earlier, many finance executives only choose to work with just one or two recruiters. So the trick is really identify those right people. How? Well, you might start by asking other CFOs and finance executives whom you respect which recruiting firms their companies have used and with which they have been deliriously happy. You might also ask those specific executives for the names of any recruiters that they've worked with in the past and have been quite happy. Now, that specific recruiter may or may not be a good fit for you, but at least you have a working list with which to begin identifying recruiters to research. Should you find that they are or could be a good fit, or that you would at least like to have a conversation, circle back around to your network, to that CFO or finance executive who gave you the name, and ask for an introduction. Make it a warm lead versus a cold call. If they're unwilling to do that, then make sure that in your email to the recruiter, the very first thing they see is the name of the person who gave you their name, so that you increase the odds that you'll get a response to that cold call. You could also do a Google search for smaller boutique search firms who play in your space, and then reach out to them on LinkedIn. You might look for people in your network on LinkedIn or in your physical network who are already connected with a particular recruiter and ask for introductions. And introductions just always work better than cold calls. LinkedIn truly is a great resource for tracking down recruiters. I would venture a guess that the majority of recruiters, particularly small boutiques, are on LinkedIn. And I take that another step and say that they are looking actively for subject matter experts, and they are specifically looking for them within LinkedIn groups. Keep the right perspective. Recruiters only account for about 10% of the available jobs. Now, granted, at the C-level, that 10% might actually be a bigger number comparatively speaking, but the point is they don't have a job rec for every single position available. You need recruiters, even if you consider them a necessary evil, but they aren't the only strategy for top talent. To bear this out, one of the other questions that we asked in our survey was, which job search methods have you found to be most effective? Notice the C-suite. 51% deems networking as very effective. 53.5% deem former relationships as very effective. I don't know. I sort of see former relationships as the same as networking. So you can see that that really, compared to recruiters at 11.6, is a pretty significant number. And I don't say that to deter you from using recruiters. I say it to help you keep the right perspective. So that was the C-suite. We also asked the same question of executives, and you can see networking, very effective, 60%. Former relations, 40%. Recruiters, 12.5. And you know, if you look at the effective rate, 41.7, that's a pretty high number. So executives do have good success with recruiters. But I would ask this question, are you surprised by the networking versus recruiter numbers? It's really good to keep a right perspective. One respondent who was a C-level executive said this, networking is key, followed by the use of LinkedIn. And he's absolutely right. My clients are routinely contacted by recruiters for great opportunities through LinkedIn. Part of the reason that they are contacted is that they have great profiles. And I just wrote a blog post about this earlier this week. The only thing worse than not being on LinkedIn is to have a profile that is completely incomplete. Good advice in there if you're interested in reading it. So with regard to recruiter relationships, this is really the way that you want them to work. This gentleman says that he got a call out of the blue for a job that changed his life. Sounds like a dream, doesn't it? This gentleman indicated that he had a long-standing relationship with a client who had a long-standing relationship with the client. Undoubtedly, this was a retained executive search firm. The client or the recruiter understood the fabric of the client. So he understood the company's culture. And as a result, he was very keyed in to who the right people were that he needed to bring into that organization. And finally, another quote that said, 3 wonderful positions, all secured through a retained search firm. Undoubtedly, this gentleman had a relationship with this recruiter. So to summarize, these are the 3 things that we talked about that you can do to make recruiter relationships work for you. Have a clear and compelling, branded, visible value proposition to attract the right recruiters with the right positions. Number 2, leverage the power of passive positioning by building relationships before you need them. And while you appear to be as happy as a clam in your current position, there is nothing more attractive to that recruiter competitive nature than a perfectly happy, passive candidate who has no interest in moving. And finally, treat recruiters with respect and courtesy, even if you have to throw something at the wall after you hang up. Be helpful, be a resource, act as a connector to people you think they might need or want to know, and remember the big picture. Keep the right perspective. As I said, I don't personally think recruiters are a necessary evil. but I do think they are necessary for executives and finance chiefs. And it behooves each of you to take the reins of your career and maintain control of these relationships. If recruiters aren't reaching out to you, maybe they aren't selling what you want. It's fine to be the square peg that fits in the square hole. Just make sure you stand out, far out, from the other square pegs. Be branded, be compelling, be visible, and remember, networking is a verb. Recruiters become the most frustrating when they, not you, seem to be in control. Just don't give them that power. And with that, John, I'll turn the webinar back over to you. I think we have some polling questions, and then we'll take some questions.
We do indeed. Thank you. That was genuinely interesting, some surprising statistics in there. Before we get back to that and launch into questions, we have two quick polling questions. And once again, even if you're not here for CPE credit, we'd love to know what you think. So we'll pop these open and give them about 30 seconds each. Also, while we're doing this, I'll go ahead and remind everyone that if you have any questions for Cindy, please feel free to ask them via the question area in the GoToWebinar control panel. So that's probably about enough for that first poll. I'm going to go ahead and close that one. We'll pop the second one up and get that one going. We'll do another 30 seconds, and we'll jump into the questions that we've got here. One quick note while folks are taking this, after we are done with this webinar, you will be presented with a quick survey. We would appreciate you taking about a minute and a half to run through just a handful of questions. Plus, during that survey, we'll ask whether you want us to connect you directly with Cindy. If you have any further questions or would like to make that connection, you can just click on the box in the survey. It'll take you 2 seconds, and we'd be more than happy to make that connection for you. So, simple as that. Why don't we go ahead and close that down, and we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the results of these. And Cindy, I'm going to ask you to weigh in here. So the first poll question is, which job search method have you found to be most effective? Interesting to compare and contrast this with what you had up on the screen earlier, but what do you think about what we've got here?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it bears out what our survey said, and that is that really networking is key. And if you throw in recruiters, I mean, really, the networking number might even reflect the fact that some of the people who respond had a relationship with recruiters with whom they networked on a regular basis. So networking and former relationships, I mean, truly, it just speaks to the power of how important networking is to you being successful in uncovering those opportunities. Recruiters really don't have a big market share, but your network has a huge market share.
Great. Let's take a quick look at the second question as well. And this question is, in your experience, do you get better opportunities from name brand boutiques, both neither? And what do you think about what we see here?
Yeah, interesting how much bigger the small boutique number is. I'll tell you what jumps out to me is the 30% for neither. I think that's a pretty big number.
Well, it's interesting. Maybe that's congruent with the finding from one of the earlier statistics you showed about how the success of networking. And maybe folks are having so much success there, they're not needing to go with boutiques or large firms for that matter. Interesting. Well, why don't we go ahead and grab a handful of questions here while we have the time. First question, which I'm sure you'll appreciate, Cindy, is where can I find Cindy's blog?
It's a very easy URL, cfo-coach.com. And if you want to go directly to the blog, it's /blog, cfo-coach/blog. cfo-coach.com.
There you go. There we go. /blog. All right, great. So we've got that one. Thanks for asking that question. So we've got a question here. Can you share your recent experience about how long it's taking someone currently looking to land a CFO or executive level finance or related position? What's that timeline look like these days?
You know, the stats that just came out from the Execunet job market survey indicated that the average number, and this wasn't just finance execs, this was just executives period, was 5.7 months, so roughly 6. I really think that it is important to set expectations, and I always tell people that I work with, you should plan for 9. It could be quicker. It might very well be quicker, but a lot of that depends on your strategy and your positioning. So, you know, how clear is your value proposition? But I think 9 months is a really reasonable expectation. I'm not really finding that people are hanging around for a month and 15 months and 18 months. Not my clients. Let me be clear about that. There are a lot of people who've been unemployed for a very long time. The longer you're out, the harder it is. Despite the great people that are available because they're not working, the perception is still passive candidates are really desirable, particularly by recruiters who have been hired by companies to lure away that candidate. So that kind of candidate is going to find a much easier, quicker, and easier is a relative term, less challenging, faster move versus somebody who's unemployed and is battling that issue. So 6 months on the short end, I think a realistic expectation is 9.
So back to the recruiter topic, if you are interested in connecting with a recruiter, and you even know some recruiters who sort of serve your space and for whom you believe you would be qualified to reach out to, are they interested in getting inbound communication from someone they don't necessarily know? How would you recommend someone goes about targeting and actually introducing themselves, if that's what it comes to the recruiter that they would like to work with?
Yeah, it is really hard. I say I don't defend recruiters very often, and this is one of the times when I won't defend them. They really do not make it easy for candidates to reach out to them. That said, I think the easiest thing to do is to look to see if they're on LinkedIn. Connect with them. Most recruiters have open networking, so most recruiters will connect with you. More importantly, look to see if they're in groups that you also belong to on LinkedIn. And if they are, choosing a couple of groups to become more visible can really help to bridge the gap between a recruiter who has every job seeker in the world trying to connect with him and this potential candidate who really is standing out above the crowd. And that assumes, of course, that you can't get a warm referral. It is best in either scenario, whether you're looking for a warm lead in the door or whether you're using LinkedIn, to reach out to recruiters before you need them. I mean, honestly, recruiters aren't stupid. If you're an active job seeker and you're reaching out to them, they're going to conclude that, the next step in the process is you're going to start bugging them about finding you a job. So when you do reach out to them, when you do get them to connect with you on LinkedIn, and by the way, customize your LinkedIn invitation. That is so important. You're not building a Rolodex. You're building a relationship. Customize your LinkedIn invitation. And so give them a reason to connect with you. And don't make it about a job. Make it about something else. I see that you are involved in this. I see that you're connected to this person. I see that you're in this group. Make it personal. It gives them more of an incentive to reach out to you. And then really, once you're connected with them, you want to raise your visibility among them in ways that position you as a subject matter expert. You know, it's the old push and pull marketing concept. You can push your way into their face and they're not going to respond well, or you can pull them towards you because you are such a brilliant finance executive that they can't help themselves. And that's really what you want, and that's the easiest path.
Great. I think we have time for one more question here. Why don't we, we've got a few queued up, but let me just pick one that looks like it might be quick. If a recruiter who doesn't know me emails me about an opportunity that's not a fit, what should I do?
You know, again, research the recruiter. Might not be a good fit today, but the recruiter might really be exactly the kind of person that you want to be connected to. And so how you respond really depends on the answer to that question. If it's a run-of-the-mill, you know, low-end contingency, not in your space, maybe they're a generalist, you know, you can respond very politely, appreciate you reached out to me, this doesn't really appear to be a good fit for me. But if it is a recruiter with whom you want to build a relationship, you want the opportunity to A, talk to them, B, refer them to a colleague. You want some kind of a response in place that will further that relationship, so it's not a one and done.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And in order to get folks back to whatever they're doing in a timely fashion, we want to be mindful of the time here. It's about 1 minute to the top of the hour. So let's go ahead and start to wrap this up. And first, I'd like to thank Cindy for your time and insight. Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us this wonderful insight into such a critical process in all of our professional lives. So thank you very much, Cindy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You betcha. Secondly, I'd like to thank everyone who took the time today. We realize how busy everyone is, and it's wonderful to have you spend an hour with us this morning. Just very quickly, if anyone has any questions about CPE credit, just take a look at the email address for Dawn Moore at the bottom of this slide, and she would be more than happy to answer any questions you have. If you pre-signed up for CPE credits, you'll simply get an electronic certificate within 48 hours, and that will just happen automatically. But if you do have any questions or you forgot to or neglected to pre-sign up, just drop her a note and she'll take care of you. We will, immediately after shutting down the webinar, you will be presented with a survey, a brief survey. We greatly appreciate your giving us feedback. We always want to know what we can do better the next time, so please let us know. Also, in there, we make it really simple for you to ask us to connect you with Cindy, and if you're interested in doing that, click on the mouse. So please let us know. We'd be more than happy to connect you with her for a continued conversation. And with that, a final thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful weekend all, and we hope to see you again on another Performative event or online at performative.com. Thanks. Have a great weekend. Bye now.